In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
Warm welcome to you from Pakhuis de Zwijger. I'm Jurgen Chonafong and I will be your moderator this afternoon. Well, we're into our second edition of We Make the City Reset, and we're also well into the second lockdown. And the new normal doesn't feel that normal anymore. Well, it doesn't feel that new anymore at all, but still we have to deal with that reality. With our main guest today, we will discuss what makes the city a city, and how in future can we develop systems in order to make that city function better, or at least differently than today. If you would like to join in our conversation, that is possible. If you go to our program page on dysfunctional and you log into Zoom, you can make use of the chat function there to post questions to the people here in the studio and the people who are our guests through Zoom. Make sure you mention who your question is directed to. Now, for our main guest, industrial designer Yassine Salihine helped global players in footwear and the automotive industry with design and manufacturing innovations. And now he wants to apply those perspectives on the way we design cities. Later on in the program, we will be joined by Grațian Mihăilescu, and he has national and international experience for over 10 years in the field of development, communication, public policy, and innovation. I think those are very challenging, interesting, and very nice guests, and I'd like to welcome our main guest here, Yassine Salihine. Welcome to you.
Thanks, Jurgen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us here. Let's start off right away. You call yourself a definer instead of a designer. What do you mean by that?
Well, for me, designing really starts with defining. So defining the status quo, so understanding where we are now at the moment, but also understanding how we got here. So how did we get to the current situation? So you can really, I think to design, you really need to define the context in such a way that you can come up with alternative perspectives, new views on the current affairs. And for me, I found myself usually with my clients more defining than designing. So taking steps back and saying, okay, how did we get here? What was the trajectory? How can we alter this trajectory to create a different future? And that's what led me to calling myself more a definer than a designer.
And how far do you go back in history in order to define the current context?
Well, that totally depends. As you know, there are no simple answers to complex problems. So it is usually about peeling back the different layers that surround a certain topic. And that could be going back 100 years or 50 years, but it could also maybe go back 1,000 years. It all depends on the length of the trajectory and what's there to be changed or investigated.
Later on in the program, we will talk about new generations, about youth and their perspective on future. But I would like to know now, sometimes it's better not to have the burden of your past when you have to define the future. And that's, also the power of youth. They're not burdened by the past. So I'd say in defining the context, it's more about the current situation, and history in that sense is only a burden. How would you react to that?
I would not agree to that, because we are creatures that are made up of past, present, and future at the same time. And even though youth doesn't mean that you don't have a past. You have ancestors. The city you live in has a past. You might have a past with different types of education or culture or whatever. And to throw that away would be throwing away a lot of important information that can be transferred. Well, it's not even information. Usually it's also knowledge and wisdom that can be used. So I don't I think we always have to look at the past, but try to not make it a burden, but see it as a kind of something to step on and to enable us to reach higher.
Right, and there's a Surinamese proverb that I very much like, and that says, to know where you go, you have to know where you come from. And in that sense,
so
that's
true.
important.
Yeah.
The presentation that you'll give in a moment has got the title, From Now On, Local Means Anywhere. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that's already happening right now, right? So usually locality was connected or locked to a physical geographical space or place. But now, if I'm at my job, I could be at home. So local then means different things. I'm at different places at the same time. Even though I'm at home, I'm also at my job. And even within the context of my presentation, where we're going to talk about autonomous vehicles, autonomous buildings, those kinds of things, it also means that wherever you are is what local is. So you got the Surinamese proverb. It's like I got a hip hop proverb. It's not where you're from; it's where you're at. You know? So that's kind of the.
But in regards to city development, that's quite interesting as well. What future will hold? Because I understood that now 50% of the people lives in an urban environment. That will probably rise to 70%, although we don't know what happens in future, because what COVID exposed as well is that people living in urbanized areas, well, they're more susceptible for viruses as well. And what you see in Amsterdam now, that in 2017, the population didn't grow, but it shrank with 3,400 people, which never happened in years. Is urbanization something that still will continue in future, or do we see, are we at a turning point now?
Well, I'll go again with, it depends on how you define urban and urbanization, right? So if you define it as the way cities are at the moment, I don't think this is a situation that can go on a lot longer, right? So especially in Amsterdam, it's logical that that there will be less people because it's so expensive to live here and those kinds of things. And you see these changes also happening in Rotterdam, but these are things that were already happening, like in Hong Kong, where you have cage apartments where people share one apartment with 10 people and they have their own little cubicle. And there are also reverse trends going on, like the current exhibition of Oma and Amo that deals with the return to the rural areas and a reignited interest for rurality and what that could mean for the city. So there's always these continuous movements going on, but I think we need to think about what we define the city as. But
what is your perception? Will the rural areas be as popular? Because on the other hand, if you look at other diseases and viruses, they exploded in rural areas as well. So you're not, very safe in that regard to protect yourself from viruses.
Yeah. Well, again, this depends on where you are at. So this idea that you were not safe is something that we in Europe, we have lived in this relative safety far from these kinds of things. And now we have to deal with all the things that other people deal with in the rest of the world. So it's just that the things have caught up to us now. So you're not safe anywhere in that sense, but it depends on how we deal with it and how we approach these kinds of problems, and also to see where these kinds of problems arise from. What is the source of these viruses or of these economic situations, all these kinds of things. These are things we have now seriously look at and engage with, I think.
And will it do something, the recognition of these viruses and the humility you almost describe when we have to realize that we're not different than others, will that do something with inequality within cities?
Yeah, for now it will just increase, right? So the inequality, the rich or the wealthy have the means to isolate or to, they just changed countries and went to their outhouses in the country or in the south of France or wherever, right? Or even in the Netherlands, they just shifted spaces. So I think what you see now is things being unveiled, right? Yeah. It could be seen as an unveiling, and and we see the structures, the infrastructure underneath everything that's happening.
Right. Well, like I said, you have a presentation prepared. I'm very much looking forward to that. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
Like I said, here's the presentation of Yassine.
Good afternoon, everybody, watching from afar in their own locality, wherever that may be. So the subtitle of this presentation is called Liquid City, and I would like to set the context of how this idea of or concept of liquid city came about. So in 2015, I was researching the future of autonomous vehicles for a client. And as you know, there has been a lot of talk about autonomous transportation is being hailed as the future of transportation, and a lot of people cannot wait to just sit in their car and then be driven around everywhere to where they want to go. There's also a lot of misconceptions about autonomous vehicles and philosophical ideas and problems. But I wanted to look at to see how far we could take this concept of autonomous transportation, because I thought it was one of the next steps in the digitalization of the world around us, a process that's continuously going on. So one of the outcomes was car-architecture, as I called it, and where the house and the car would be blending. So the car would become a room that could travel. And that also triggered the question, if that's the case, if the car is a part of a house and that part of the house could travel, if we take it a step further, what if the car is the home and the city is just a collection of such homes, right? So then you come into the territory of, okay, what is then the city, right? If the city continuously moves or shifts from place to place. And this idea of the car as a room was apparently something that was floating around. So a couple of years later, I was doing some research on the Tokyo Motor Show, and there Honda presented the Lemobi, which you can see here, and which was essentially a room that could travel. It's integrated into the house, as you see, and it's furnished with furniture that's the same inside the car and in the house. And at that time, also a lot of other manufacturers presented kind of similar concepts. So Renault had a similar concept, which was a little bit different, and a lot of other manufacturers did that. So it's interesting also in this line of work, if you're looking at the status quo and the past and the future, that all these ideas usually arise at a certain moment. So the idea was, of course, nothing new, right? It was an update to earlier concepts like Mike designed in 2001, designed the automobile, which was essentially a room you stepped in. It was not integrated, but it was just a continuation of your house. You could step in it and then go to your work, right? But there was still this separation, right, between work and house, or traveling to somewhere to do something else. Or even earlier, designer and architect Mario Biellini's Kara Sutra in the 70s, with this very 70s lounge feel, a room that was in that sense flexible, full of cushions, very in the space of that era, in the mindset of that era. And even earlier, maybe the most famous example of moving architecture was Archigram's Walking City by Ron Herron and their free time node trailer cage from the end of the 60s, where you had these trailers that could be plugged into different places where you have these kind of parking lots, and people could plug in and then make use of the amenities, kind of like a stacked camping. So these, especially also Archigram, came up with a lot of these techno-optimistic ideas about the future, which are also think pieces, but had these interesting layers to them, but would be prove very hard to have come to fruition because of technology, those kinds of things. But thanks to digital technology that we have now, these ideas might have a chance now, and we will see why that might be important, or how that can change our idea of what a city is, or how it functions. So now I would like to switch over to digitalization, and which is a key word in this process. And digitalization is often presented almost synonymous with democratization. And we're often presented with the digital will enhance democracy. Why? Because it gives people freedom of choice. There's more choice, and it's convenient, and they have more choices. So automatically, it becomes kind of democratic. But this, in my opinion, is a kind of reductionist idea of what democracy or democratization really means, because it's usually a conflation of those 2 points of freedom of choice, right? There's a lot, and you can choose from a lot. But how you make an informed choice, or what those choices actually mean, or is there even a difference between all those choices, is never addressed. And I think the other point, convenience, is even more intrusive, where convenience creates this idea of making things very easy to do, very convenient for you. But we always have to think about, at least what I do with these kinds of terms, is to think about, for who is it really convenient, right? What do you get in this exchange? This convenience, in my idea, has a price, right? And that price is de-skilling and loss of control. So you see here an example of a Facebook page and an HTML for a web page, and we could do this for a whole lot of different things, from photo cameras to all telephones to a lot of other different objects also. So it's not only software related, but by not being able to understand and change what's happening under the hood of what you are doing, a transfer of control takes place, right? So you gain convenience, you lose control. And that control might be necessary, or I think is always necessary, to live an autonomous life, or a life where you at least have the chance of altering your circumstances. So in the city, this idea of having no or little control over the infrastructure, we take that for granted, right? We're not continuously changing the roads or the streets or the buildings ourselves, right? It's usually done for us, and we have no control over that. So, and even more so, the infrastructure of a city is a tool of control, right? So how we walk, where we shop, where we walk, how we protest, all these kinds of things are defined and controlled by the infrastructure. And sometimes you see people taking shortcuts or using alleyways that are not designed to do that, to kind of resist the control. But we take that for granted. Like in the picture you see here in Paris, the Plan Haussmann, where there's still conflicting ideas about it. Old Paris was dirty, smelly, full of diseases, cramped, so and restless. They tore it down, built these large boulevards, which also some people say it's designed in a way that armies could go very easily through the city, and also they were very hard to blockade. Others say it's a byproduct of that design. Well, that's up for people to decide upon, but it is a measure of control. Another example is Robert Moses, one of the most influential men in city planning in New York in the 60s and 70s, and he ruthlessly built freeways through poor communities, effectively cutting them off from each other, bypassing richer communities that didn't have to deal with the noise and pollution and what else these freeways brought with them. But also he's famously known for creating bridges there were parks and there were bridges in the neighborhood of those parks, and he made those bridges so low that buses could not pass, but cars could pass, and these bridges started to function as a kind of a hardware filter for the less fortunate people or the less wealthy people, because they usually traveled by bus to these parks or these beaches, and they could now had to walk or take other forms of transport, and were effectively barred from getting there without saying to them, you cannot go there. So when we combine this infrastructure of the city and the digitalization, and we get the digitalization of the city, and we saw that digitalization is permeating every part of our lives, the concept that we see now popping up everywhere is the concept of the smart city. So smart is to the city what autonomous is to the car, right? It's being hailed as the defining thing that's going to change our cities, the way we interact with our cities. And cities all over the world are scrambling to become smarter. What does that mean? So we see this barrage of smart lampposts, traffic lights, garbage cans being designed and developed and installed all over the place. Again, with this idea of, oh, they're really convenient, right? So they're, go back, right? So like you see with the bench, it says smart bench, phone charging, Wi-Fi, internet, and air quality insights. So yeah, it's really convenient for you as a citizen or as a inhabitant of that city to make use of it. And even complete smart neighborhoods in existing cities and complete new smart cities are being planned and built. And here again, convenience is the tool by which these developments are being sold to the public. And again, this is a layer of infrastructure that's being built with no control for those who use it, right? It's control disguised as convenience. And these images, this image in particular, is one of the proposals from Sidewalk Labs, a subsidiary of Alphabet, which a lot of people know as, formerly known as Google. And it was supposed to build a smart neighborhood in Toronto, but COVID thwarted that plan. And I found it, well, kind of ironic that a digital infection was stopped by a physical virus. All of this is unfortunate because I think that digitalization could change cities in a radical way and give the public a way for self-control and self-reliance. So if we start to think differently, right? So what if we are not locked to the plot of land a house is on? So the tiny house movement is sometimes perceived as a hipster phenomenon, but it can show us a way how to differently organize a city and what is truly important. And even more so if we mesh it with autonomous technology that is in control of the inhabitants. Or what if we could change the scenery we see out of our window? If we could continuously travel through the landscape? Or what if we could create our own self-reliant neighborhoods and communities using these technologies to communicate, but not only communicate, but share power, share resources, those kinds of things. And be cooperative instead of competing. What if local was wherever you are at the moment, right? So wherever you are is where you're supposed to be, and you never feel out of place. And you could organize things with your community. So I would say, how about giving communities technology to create not a smart city, but an empathic city? A city where the technology is in service of the human and in control of citizens and the public instead of giant corporations. And they could use it to organize and benefit themselves as small local communities that are part of a bigger whole that moves around or is fluid enough to resist threats from outside. What if the city was a collection of self-reliant neighborhoods traveling through the landscape, reconfiguring in different formations whenever necessary? So what if the city truly becomes liquid? So I think that reimagining how our cities are organized and how we use and share our resources and who controls them is one of the most important questions of this age, and the city as a cloud of buildings moving through time and space might be a way to think about who controls what and why. And the city doesn't have to be liquid, right? So the water can have different phases. It can be a gaseous, liquid, or solid. So we could also reimagine the city as being gaseous, as being the elements are far apart, linked together only in the digital, and then being liquid, it's a little bit more tight-knit, but still fluid enough to move around, or really tight-knit and solid like ice, and really together whenever the situation arises and whenever that is needed. So that concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for your attention, even though I cannot see you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Yassine. It's very, very invigorating and interesting to know how it works. If you can join me here at the table again, there's a couple of questions I would like to ask you. Because you started with the ideas and introduction in your introduction from the 70s and the 60s. Should we make sure that those ideas are being revived, or how should we go about them? Because, like you said, the context has changed and some things are possible now. Should we go back in that sense to those ideas?
I never proposed to go back. I proposed to effectively not mine, but see what were good ideas in those time and which could not work in that time. So a lot of things fail, but failure doesn't mean failure is also a body of knowledge, because there's a reason why things fail. And if we can understand why things fail and how we might gain interesting things from that. So I have an example from my shoe working days. I was working at also for a shoe museum with a knowledge institute, and people from Timberland came there because they wanted to make sustainable hiking boots, but they wanted to make them in such a way that no glue was used. And usually, in the past, shoes were made in that way. They were using little wooden pens, and those wooden pens would get wet, they would expand, and then water would not permeate the shoe anymore. And there was a machine, a wooden pegging machine, but nobody could use that anymore because nobody knew anymore how to use it. And they had it
knowledge disappeared.
No, but with digital technology, you could automate it or robotize it, and then you could still use it again and create shoes again that were sustainable. So those shoes were not made anymore because it was cheaper to use glue. So not all progress is better. So that's why we need to see what things failed, why they failed, and how can we maybe revive them to learn something from them.
Exactly. Thank you. There's another thing that I found very interesting. Convenience is obtrusive. You know, what's the price of exchange? You mentioned de-skilling and loss of control. But are we still in the position to turn that around? Because we're so used to those forms of convenience that, you know, the only way forward seems to make use of that, and, you know, sacrificing things like privacy or things like losing control. Can we turn that around?
Yeah, it's about value systems. It depends on what you value. But what we see now, for example, with Corona, is that now we have some things, we have to change them if we want them or not. So you better change them when you have the ability to want it or to be in control yourself, than it being thrust upon you and you have no way to, in what sense, control the outcome or steer the outcome to something that might be better for you. So I think that's important.
But is that momentum not gone? I mean, how do you change?
So. I don't think so. If I see, for example, what my student, I teach at the Royal Academy of Art at the Master of Industrial Design, and I teach design research there. And I see what my graduate students do and how they use technology to enhance human empathy, to connect people in a true sense, not in the Facebook sense. There's a lot of preservation going on. They are very much concerned with preserving certain traditions or wisdom and enhancing that with digital technology so that it can be used by more people and be accessible to more people. I think that there's a lot of momentum to do that.
Right. Another thing I would like to propose to you as well is that co-creation in future cities and in developing ideas of future cities, co-creation is important. How do you make that future-proof? So how do you prevent, when you involve a lot of people, that it's not only about the here and now, but also what's sustainable in future, in ideas, in context, in use?
Yeah, well, that's a $1 million question, isn't it? Right? I think that is a really hard question to answer. It's a lot of trial and error, but I do think that it's by involving an as diverse set of people as possible, right? So I truly believe in heterogeneity. So because if we look at nature, or nature is not homogeneous, right? So there's always a different solution for a problem arising from one of the millions of species or types of plants or whatever. There's always, so I think heterogeneity is something that we have to build into our societies, and learning to see the perspectives of different people, and that with their pasts, with their heritages, they can all present different perspectives on what's happening now, and the solution might lie somewhere in between.
And that hopefully that's future-proof as well. Yeah. And what do you think is the biggest task or responsibility of designers? What tasks should they take upon them in the world as we know it today?
To listen and give access to people, right? And not always think of, am I oppressing someone with what I'm designing? Because that's we as designers have a bad track record in that sense, and we need to be aware. That's why I emphasize the context and the status quo and how we got here, to understand that we always need to listen to the people who use the things we think of, or ideally we give them access with our knowledge and tools to create the solutions that they need.
Right. Let's involve our guest into the conversation, because we've invited Grațian Mihăilescu, who has a national and international experience of over 10 years in the field of development, communication, and public policy and innovation. We've got a short film to introduce him. Let's have a watch. Grațian, thank you so much for joining us. How have you been? How have you been coping here in the Netherlands? We're in our second lockdown. How are things at your side?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be online and to be with you. And I hope that next year we can meet and you can organize the festival. And I would love to take part to We Make the City there. In Romania, situation is getting worse also, and still there are some places which are open, but it seems that probably in the next 2 weeks we will have also a lockdown. So because the cases are growing of coronavirus, so I'm sure that in the next 2 or 3 weeks it will be the connectivity and the social interaction between people will be completely locked down. So even though we because you talk about co-creation and involving citizens in the shaping the future cities, we prepare a contest on urban mobility in 3 cities in Romania. And if the lockdown will come, then we will organize this contest urban mobility solution contest online.
Right. So liquidity and being able to react to different situations is also applicable at this contest as well. You've listened to Yassine's presentation. What's your reaction to that?
I believe also that smart city, it's not only about technology, that's for sure. I think we need more empathy. I think we need more citizens' involvement because, in my opinion, and it's about the changing of paradigm, we are right now shifting of another way of governance, which is a collaborative governance between all the stakeholders. So it's not only about a municipality or a mayor who's saying what he wants to develop or how he wants to develop a city. It's a collaborative governance between all the stakeholders. And that's why I think that citizens' involvement, it's very important. That's why I think also that private companies and responsibility of private companies is important for shaping the future cities, because they must design more responsible and more sustainable products, and the vision of private company should be more social. So,
but I've got a question about that, because in other episodes of We Make the City Reset, we saw that private companies, for example, in Canada, didn't always have the best interest for society in mind. When developing new areas or even new villages, the sacrifice of privacy was key, and that was the privacy and the information that they got was to benefit the company, not to benefit society. So if you want to involve private companies, how do you make sure that the best interest of society is being regarded?
It's easy. I think we are talking about UN Sustainable Development Goals here, and we must understand that CSR, and not only CSR, it should be imposed from the government to the private companies.
What is CSR?
Corporate social responsibility. So it should be this CSR must become more and more important for the visibility of a private company, and the private company should understand that only achieving this CSR goals, which are actually the UN development goals, which should be, this involvement of private companies should be developed by enforcing public policies. And through the proper policies, the private companies should become more social. I know that it's this battle of, okay, what I want to do, I want to exploit and to have to earn more, or I want to be more responsible. I think the future should be more responsible, and this could be done through policies. And I think sustainable development goals and UN could have this
have a great influence on that, because we already mentioned here that to know where you go, you have to know where you come from. So in regard to the history of Romania, can you give us a little bit more context about that history and how participatory democracy and citizens' engagement is embedded in there?
We are still at the beginning, because Romania, it's a young democracy. We have only 30 years of democracy. So we are still at the beginning of this process. But in the last 8 years, we managed somehow to become more responsive during the process of citizens' involvement in a public policy process. And actually, everything started with a movement in 2012. It was a national movement. It was against a big corporation who wanted to exploit some natural resources of Romania. And in 2012, we had this huge manifestation in Romania. And after that, in 2016, it was another manifestation regarding the corruption in politics. And after that, people understand the power that they have. And right now, they focus on a constructive, not only on manifestation against the corrupted politicians, but also this trend is becoming more active also in, let's see, participatory budgeting project in different cities. So we already learn, and we try to become to have a constructive approach right now, and to involve citizens in small projects related with the developing of the city.
Right. You're also the founder and director of Urbanized Hub in Romania. Can you explain quickly what that is?
We try to build a community of people who will influence the future city, and we organize events. We are doing urban talks regarding different topics, from architecture to the digital innovation, and we organize events like solution contests. Right now, we will develop 3 contests in 3 different cities, where we invite people to come with a sustainable solution of urban mobility. Yeah. We launch reports and policy recommendation for government, but also for the municipalities regarding how they should think, collaborate, and how should they develop the city together with the other stakeholders. So what we want to do, we want to create this urban culture to be more visible, and we want to give education and to educate communities in order to think more sustainable and more innovative, more innovative in the field of urban development.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for now. We will return to you in a bit. But first, I would like to go to Yassine, because Yassine, you brought 2 clips for us to watch. And the first one is a Japanese anime about a city with autonomous cars. Shall we first have a look and then have a discussion about it?
Yeah.
Great. Let's have a look.
Motorcycle? An X-Rider? You mean those old antiques are still running?
That was a clip from Ekuso do Raiba, in my best Japanese. It's about people that are not used to driving anymore, but take matters in their own hands, and some people do know still how to drive. Why did you want to show this clip?
Well, it's interesting. It's an anime from the year 2000, and it takes place in a future Tokyo, where all cars are autonomous vehicles, but they're centrally controlled by a central system. And even though it's a high-tech society, they apparently have not made the cars really well. So every episode, an autonomous car goes crazy and goes on the loose. But these people in the cars have no control over these cars. And the central system can stop cars that they want so the police can stop all the cars so that they have free way, kind of like a Plan Huisman, right? Where they are a digital variant of that. But there are a couple of people, a kind of an agency, that still have these skills. They didn't lose the skills of driving themselves. They are, in that sense, the true autonomous people, because they can, and they are being called upon each time something happens to come and stop the runaway cars. Now, I didn't choose this because it's a fantastic anime. Every episode is the same. But the interesting thing is this whole idea of control, autonomy, skilling and de-skilling. What skills are deemed obsolete by whom, right? So people will say to you, oh, it's not necessary anymore to be able to drive a car. Or why would you program a web page yourself because you have Facebook if you want to make a homepage or whatever? This idea of de-skilling and loss of control. That's why I thought this was a very poignant and visual example of these concepts.
But you call it de-skilling, and I certainly understand why. Yeah. But isn't it also the case that we're learning other skills?
Of course, yeah.
And in that sense, some skills have to be exchanged within each other. Isn't that a positive part as well?
No, but it's not a total de-skilling, right? So you always gain some new skills, but you have to understand or try to see who these new skills benefit, right? So if I'm now able to make very easy videos, who does that benefit? I can create more content for Facebook, and maybe if I'm lucky, I will become an influencer or something like that, and I can earn something from my content. But in most of the time, I don't earn anything but with my content, but my content's being mined. And that's also back to Grațian touched on some interesting aspects or topics, is like this whole idea of corporate social responsibility. This idea of mining and extraction is something that goes through from the industrial revolution till now. Only the ways we do it have changed, right? From extracting labor, forced labor from people, to extracting researches of the colonies, to now extracting data from our citizens and our public, right? So, and if you don't change this extraction model of this, or this value system, right, then CSR or CSA or all the just becomes like appropriation of valuable ideas, but the bottom line is always shareholder value, right? Yeah. So it's a systemic problem, and that's why also we have to think about building these kinds of systems. Who do they benefit? Right,
and it should be commonly shared with everybody.
Yeah, I truly believe in the commons and those kinds of things.
Exactly. You brought a second clip as well. Would you like to introduce that?
Well, to be honest, this clip was suggested to me, but by people here, but it's a nice clip because it also shows the other side. Like I said, I'm also an educator, and the value, and that's something that Grațian is always also dealing with, the value of the space of young people, their ideas, and a room for their ideas is something that's very important. What they can bring to the table. And
something we mentioned earlier on in the program as well. New generations, and sometimes it's beneficial to listen to them as well. Let's have a look at the second clip.
Over 1 billion young people live in towns and cities globally. As more move from rural to urban settlements, we have the opportunity to work with young people to build spaces that foster prosperity for all. If we ensure urban expansion is inclusive, we can create safe, healthy, and sustainable environments which serve everyone's aspirations and rights. But we can't do this without involving young people as active participants. When involved in policy making, their unique insights contribute to meaningful programs that cater to their needs. So how do we get there? By fostering collaboration between sectors and youth through better linked city ecosystems. Using artificial intelligence and digital innovation to transform existing services. Empowering local learning and social connectivity to prepare urban populations for the future. And improving dialogue with the global and local communities alike. Only then will we create cities that truly support the next generation. Because the future of our cities is the future of our young people. We have the power to ensure that neither are left behind.
Yeah, the future belongs to the young people. Grațian, if I quickly go over to you, what's your vision about involving young people in development, in city development, but also in development of the future of a country?
For example, I think that a lot of startups are built by the... Yes? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. A lot of startups are developed by young people. Startups are actually solutions for designing the future cities. Mm-hmm. And we see that young people are understanding better than people who are, let's say, older, the problems and the solutions for this world. So I think young architects and young IT experts are already shaping the future cities, and they will come with the solutions against the climate change or other solutions related with smart housing, smart mobility. So I think the young generation will already is shaping the future cities.
Right. Yassine, what we see in the Netherlands here with the COVID crisis as well is that people mention that young people are not willing to sacrifice their own ideas and to sacrifice their own intentions in order for the benefit of the greater good. Do you agree with that?
I think, I don't know, that's a too general of a question, no offense to you, but to answer, because I don't know the motivations of people, why, what their situations are. That's why I'm always in this kind of, I know it takes a lot of time, I know it takes a lot of effort, this kind of deep research and true dialogue to understand people's motivations. Because I don't know why maybe somebody don't want to stay home because there's a lot of trauma in the house and abuse, or somebody needs to get out because of other reasons, or has to escapism is a need because of certain situations. So I don't want to judge people if I don't know their motives.
I didn't mention it to judge people as well either, but for me it's a sign that the communication between all the generations who are in power and their understanding of the needs of young people and how to involve that in policy, there is no communication in that sense. You know, the frame of reference and the interest of young people differ very much from the older generation, and those two doesn't seem to meet. If you have that situation already when it deals with a crisis as COVID, how can you involve them in a co-creation when it involves the development of the future cities? There is this miscommunication already.
Well, yeah, well, I think that's always the case between generations, right? So there's always the case that the younger generations have their own ideas, and usually it clashes. But now with COVID, things get, in a crisis, things get troublesome because a lot of things depend on that cooperation. And before it's just.
But then I would pose, you know, it's impossible. It's nice to involve them, but it's if we see during a crisis when it's really necessary, it's really impossible to have that communication aligned. Then it's impossible for future ideas to develop.
I don't think so. That's impossible. It takes the right amount of investment, right? So if you start doing this, all of a sudden you need them. Yeah, then you're in trouble, right? So you need to forge bonds long before the crisis arises, and also not even because you think that something will be you might need somebody in a crisis, but also because it's good to forge those bonds because they create empathy, connection, communication. You can learn something, right? So forging of those bonds is always important. And then when you have that in a crisis, so if you believe in this idea of heterogeneity, of being, like was said, inclusive, so inclusive not only with the young, but also with the differently abled, the other gendered, all these kinds of things, different religions. If you really truly connect with all those people, with a true connection, then possibilities might emerge, right? And not in an opportunistic, extractive way, almost. For now I need to mine young people because I need them now, right? So that's what I think what goes wrong.
There's a final topic I'd like to address before we have to close off the program because time is running so quickly. You talked about, and Grațian as well, talked about mobility. It means as well that mobility in the old-fashioned sense, pre-COVID sense, is not happening at the moment, and it's not probable that it will happen soon. What is your view in the near future about mobility? Because the locality everywhere, that we could be urban nomads, that can work everywhere, that idea has to change. What's your vision about mobility? How will we deal with that?
Well, you saw my radical vision on mobility. I truly believe in one of the last slides was this article by George Monbiot on public luxury or private luxury, right? So do we make the public space as luxurious as possible and then use as less resources as possible for our own private things? So that means free and super good public transport, very granular ways of transportation, from e-bikes to subways to buses to high-speed trains, those kinds of things. And this is coming from somebody who is a deep car lover, right? So it's in my veins to love cars, but it's not a solution for the future. It's untenable to have some people take up so much space while other people cannot use that space. Or what we saw with COVID, when streets were closed, when children were playing on the streets and people started planting things and those kinds of things, you see the urge of people. So I think it's in a deeply public, communal, cooperative system that is not used for profit. But there is profit, but it's mental profit, it's social profit, that kind of profit.
Right. Grațian, how do you see mobility in the Romanian context?
I'm just referring to some things that were already implemented in big cities worldwide, like quality of public spaces. People realize that they need public spaces near their. They need quality public spaces near their place where they are living. Also, they start to build a lot of bike lanes. So a lot of things were happening in Milano, in Colombia, in German cities. We saw a lot of solutions for alternative urban mobility. I think this is this show how the cities will develop in the future, and I'm 100% sure that European Union will encourage this vision with funding this type of projects, and also the cities will become more walkable, like going from point A to point B, just walking. And I think those are the trends after COVID, and I am sure that a lot of municipalities and a lot of cities will change the way how goods and how people will move in the city.
Right. And you mentioned when you introduced yourself as well that you'd like to visit the conference, and we do hope that we're able to organize that conference. But what is your vision on international mobility? Will that return in the way that we used to know it or not?
I think, in my opinion, it's the people, the human interaction and the connectivity between people cannot be stopped. I think this is only a reset, like you are saying in the name of the TV. I think this is a reset, and I think at least I hope that from now on people will think more sustainable. I am sure that you cannot stop the interactivity between people. You cannot stop the way people move to a place to a place and another to another place. And I am sure that next year we will not discuss so much about COVID anymore, and we can discuss about how we will shape together the future cities.
Thank you so much, Grațian. I hope that you're completely right. And like you mentioned in your first introduction, I hope we can meet live again. Thank you so much for now, and hopefully next year here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye-bye. Yassine, do you agree? Is it impossible to stop international mobility? And is it something that, this reset is just a phase, and after this reset we can return to?
No, I don't think we can return back to what it was before, because the heavily subsidized airline industry, you already see people not traveling really far anymore for their vacations. I'm thinking to see a resurgence in people buying, for example, RVs and camper vans to be contained within their family, but still travel through the landscape. You see articles coming up on that, those kinds of things. So we have to understand that the former system was built upon all these incentives and subsidies that profited from our planet, and this is the opportunity to stop that. How painful that might be, that some, the cheap vacations far away. It's kind of like when you said 40 years ago to somebody, in the future, a lot of people won't eat any animal products and it will be completely normal, and the McDonald's will sell things that, and they would think of you as crazy. But those things may seem radical, but they are coming and they are changing. Maybe not in a way that we think, but I don't think we can go completely back to the former system, because it was exploitative. And once you see something, if you cannot unsee it, and if you willfully unsee it, then it's unethical. I think so.
Right. I think and hope as well that you're right. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I hope to continue this conversation later, and those radical insights that you mentioned and those radical changes that we're about to have. Let's hope that the old system that was exploitative can change in something more durable, more sustainable, and more beneficial for everybody here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're
Yassine.
welcome. We are the ones that need to change it. So.
That's absolutely true. It's a shared responsibility indeed. Well, this was it from We Make the City Reset for now. If you're interested in more programs from Pakhuis de Zwijger, make sure to check the website, dezwijger.nl. And if you would make a contribution to the programs of Pakhuis de Zwijger, which is more than welcome in these dire times, that is possible as well. Go to www.dezwijger.nl/pay. There you can leave a financial contribution that will benefit the programs straight away. Thank you so much for joining us today and then the other programs, and I hope to see you soon again. Bye-bye.